Hello, this is Diana Kupfer reporting from W-JAX 2013 in Munich. With me is Stefan Armbruster, who...
Hello.
Hi, Stefan, welcome. Stefan works as a field engineer for Neo Technology, the company behind Neo4j, which is an open source graph database. Stefan, what are your responsibilities at Neo?
Well, as a field engineer, you're basically responsible in a certain region for everything that has a technical aspect and is in touch in contact with the customer. So when we have new customers, I try to ramp them up, give trainings, give workshops, and I'm also involved at the support side. So when customer reports some issues, I'm part of the support team which tries to help them. Field engineers are basically based in almost every location. We have a couple of guys in US, we have in UK, we have in Asia someone. So we can cover 24/7 basically with that team. So the idea of the field team is basically to separate the core engineers from the customer, which is a good idea. They should focus on bringing the product forward, and we focus on making the customer successful with the product. And we work in close relationship with the sales guys. As soon as they need some more technical know-how, we jump in. That's basically the game.
Sounds like a reasonable model. You just gave an introduction to Neo4j here at W-JAX. The session was packed. There was a lot of interest. And it seems that graph technologies are ubiquitous. I mean, there's things like Google Knowledge Graph or Facebook Graph Search. Why is it so cool? Why is everyone so excited about graph technologies?
Well, I think graph technologies give you much more insight in the data you have. So these days, most of the value of your data set is not in the entities itself. It's in the fact how the entities are related to each other. So in the relationships. And the graph database makes the relationships explicitly, whereas in other technologies, they are either hidden in mapping tables or they are hidden in MapReduce algorithms. So we make this explicitly available and fast queryable. That's basically the key of graph technology. And as you said, a lot of big players are jumping on that, like Google and Facebook. And these guys have a scale where it's okay to build their own data store. But for any other users, it's a good advice to build on solid existing products. And that's why we're currently seeing a real hype on graph databases.
Cool. And Neo4j is also nosql technology. Now, nosql is just a common label for a bunch of very different heterogeneous technologies, not only SQL technologies, as I call it. Which contains a lot of categories like key value stores, document-oriented graph databases, and so on. When does it make sense to use a graph NoSQL database?
Yeah, that's a good question. So NoSQL is basically about finding the right technology for the right data set. So that's my interpretation of the ugly buzzword. A graph database fits in a lot of cases, especially when you have a very highly connected data set that has additionally limited uniformity of the data. So where you don't have a fixed structure and you want to create or query relationships at runtime. So we cannot limit the usage of Neo4j to a certain industry or to a certain customer size. You see graphs in a lot of areas. So think of logistics, think of genetics, think of any structures like a network, a physical network, think of software which can be built up as a network-like style. The obvious thing is a social network, of course, and there are a lot of more use cases. Think of education use cases, fraud detection. So you can't limit that. The graphs are basically everywhere, and that's our message as well.
Mm-hmm. Graphs are everywhere. Sounds great. Now let's talk about another label, another term. Neo4j is a native graph database. Can you explain what that means?
Yeah, there are a couple of graph databases out there, and you can distinguish them between native databases and non-native graph databases. The non-native graph databases use another kind of storage backend which they build on top of that. So for example, there are graph databases that provide a graphy interface on top of another layer like Cassandra or something like that. These technologies we consider as non-native graph databases, whereas a native graph database removes that intermediate layer and stores the graph on disk in a very efficient way. So the goal is to make these traversals jumping from one node to its neighbors as fast as possible, triggered by both the storage layout on disk and as well the memory layout when we're speaking of objects there.
Mm-hmm. Would you say this is a very unique feature of Neo4j?
Yeah, we invest a lot in the design of the store format and the data structures. We hide a lot of complexity under a very simple API. This is in fact very unique, yes.
Okay. What is also unique is that Neo4j comes with its own query language, which is Cypher. How do I get started with it? Is it difficult? Is it easy? What's it like?
Well, Cypher is very easy to learn. So you basically get started by drawing the graph you have in mind on a whiteboard. And you will typically draw something like round circles, which are the nodes, and you have some arrows in between, which are the relationships. And you can very easily adopt that to ASCII art-like notation. And then you're pretty close to a Cypher traversal statement already. You have to add some semantics, like you need to specify where you start the traversal. You need to specify what you have in the return value set. Then you put this together and can get started with it. So I had a lot of trainings for half or for a full day to ramp up people with Cypher, and after a couple of hours they are really learned a lot and can make rather complex queries up to recommendation use cases with a single Cypher statement. So I think the learning curve is pretty flat, so you can get up to speed in a very short period of time with that. Mm-hmm. And we have excellent community support for this as well. So we have a good mailing list. You can answer a question on this on Stack Overflow and you will get a very fast response for that.
Cool. And I think Cypher has also undergone some changes for the next major of Neo4j, which is just around the corner. What are your favorite or highlight features of the second major?
Yeah, so the 2.0 release is just we're very close to that. The major feature in 2.0 is basically that we changed for the first time in 10 years our data model. So starting with 2.0, a node might have optionally labels. Labels can be thought of like a tag attached to a node, and Cypher can pick up those labels for querying, and this enables something which we call schema indexes. So you can declare an index. For example, you want to index the property name on the label person. This declaratively indexes all persons' name, and you can very easily look them up laterwards and find Stefan, for example, in the graph with a simple index lookup. And the new thing is that in Cypher you don't need to explicitly state that you should find Stefan with the index lookup. You just said find me a node carrying the label person and the name property Stefan, and the Cypher engine under the hood will figure out, well, there is an index that can answer that question very quickly, and then I make use of it. So the usage model of Cypher is much more closer to what we are familiar from SQL perspective with respect to how indexes work. So we don't have to specify them explicitly. We use them implicitly from now on, which is a big advantage, in my opinion.
Okay. Any other features you want to highlight?
Yeah, there are a couple of more features in the 2.0 release. So Cypher has a lot of new statements. There is, for example, a union statement, which we know from SQL. There are some other refinements. The underlying parser of Cypher has been completely refactored. There is a lot of new stuff on this. And there is also a couple of webinar recordings already out there which focus on the new features of 2.0, because I think we can cover them all in the short interview. So and there will be a lot of stuff going out when the release is out of the doors. We will have a lot of user group talks and other slide decks available to inform you on that. And the documentation is already available for 2.0, so you can just go to docs.neo4j.org, go to the milestone release, and make your way there.
Sounds very good. So it sounds like something we should be looking forward to. Thanks, Stefan, for explaining this so well. And thanks for watching JAX TV.
Thank you very much for the interview. I enjoyed it.